Maps. 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 There are all kinds of maps, but Sledgehammer must not have gotten the memo. I've been enjoying COD World War II quite a bit, as much as one can enjoy running around like a chicken with their head cut off, but it's a decent first-person shooter. I quit Call of Duty after Black Ops 2 because Ghosts and the other games just weren't really doing anything for me. I still enjoyed those classic COD games though, and was hoping World War II would be a return to form. Though I think it succeeds in being boots on the ground, like, how could they screw that up? I don't think it reaches the heights of Modern Warfare or Black Ops 1 and 2. Really, any of the other Call of Duty games that I liked. One of the biggest reasons for this is the map design. Call of Duty has always been about fast, smooth combat, and has always had relatively small maps, especially compared to Battlefield. But with what feels like the smallest set of maps yet at launch for any COD game I've played, so COD 1 through Black Ops 2, it just seems to be at a ridiculous level of chaotic action at this point. It just doesn't take long enough to cross the maps. They're too small, and feels like people are always coming up behind you, whether they spawn there or there's just so many different ways to move through the map. But I didn't really have any proof of this, and instead of just hating on COD because I feel like it, I wanted to prove that these maps were indeed too small. It was hard coming up with a method to test this. Should I measure the average engagement distance, or how long it takes to walk across the map, the furthest line of sight on the map? I settled on how long it takes to walk around each map without sprinting to help control the results. This method was going to be the quickest and easiest to measure the relative size of each map in a quantitative manner. However, measuring the perimeter is actually a little tricky due to what's known as the coastline paradox. Basically, you can't just accurately measure the length of a coastline, aka the perimeter of a Call of Duty map, because the more accurate you measure, the longer the perimeter seems to get. Here's a simple example of that. I didn't use meters or any unit of distance to measure the maps, since there isn't a method to determine distance in each game, and that would take way too long. So minutes and seconds was going to have to do for measuring. But the coastline paradox doesn't go away just because I'm going to use different measuring device. So to help control the results and not give maps with a bunch of nooks and crannies an advantage, I just decided to basically smooth out the edges of the map by moving close to the edge, but not exactly hugging it all the time. I followed each perimeter counterclockwise, so always turning right, except when there's a turn that would lead me down a passage towards the interior of the map. I know this might sound a little confusing, but it's really not. Okay, so with all that out of the way, let's get to the numbers. I tested each vanilla map from Call of Duty 2 all the way up to Modern Warfare 3, so ignoring all of the DLC maps. I didn't test Black Ops 2 because I don't have that game with me right now, and I didn't test Ghosts and all the other ones because people don't really consider those to be the best games, so I didn't want to dilute the testing. And most of those have advanced movement too, so it wouldn't really make sense. It's important to keep in mind that Call of Duty 2 did not have sprinting, so the maps feel a little bit larger in-game, but the walking speed feels a little faster than all the games, so that helps balance it out. World War II has the least amount of maps available at launch with 9, if you don't include the war maps, which I'm not really going to. That's tied with Call of Duty 3, which if you remember had about a 9-month development cycle, compared to World War II's 3 years. It's kind of sad. All the other games had quite a bit more, with all the Modern Warfare games having 16. If you look through each individual game, you can see there's quite a bit of variance. If we put them all together, you can see there's not really a pattern up to Black Ops, but at that point the games seem to be decreasing in their average size of the maps. So an interesting tidbit, the largest map that I tested was Lay or May, I think that's how you say it, from Call of Duty 3. It was kind of by far the biggest map. It's pretty ridiculous. It's actually probably a little bigger than this because when I was testing it a couple times I got closer to 4 minutes walking around the perimeter. This was definitely the hardest map for me to test an accurate perimeter because each time I did it, it was different. For the other maps, they were all pretty accurate each time I did it multiple times. I would say with all of these measurements, there's about a plus or minus 5 seconds. And if we look at the averages, you can kind of see that there's a downward trend, but interestingly enough, World War II's average map size is greater than Modern Warfare 3. I find this really fascinating because I thought the map design in Modern Warfare 3 wasn't that bad, but it turns out the maps in that game were actually smaller than in World War II. Call of Duty 3 has the largest maps on average, which I kind of assumed that was going to be the case, because if you've ever played that game, the maps are they're not really that great and they're pretty huge. Now if you look at the standard deviation, we can see the differences in the map sizes, relatively speaking. You can see that World War II definitely has the smallest deviation in the size of the maps, which I think might actually be a bigger contributing factor to the feeling that all of the maps feel pretty much the same than just them being small. Kind of the classic Call of Duty games seem to have a pretty big deviation, with the deviation getting smaller over time. So World at War has the most diverse maps, and World War II has the least diverse maps. So what does this tell us about World War II? I don't think the actual map size is the thing that's bringing down the map design and how they feel. I think what's more important is the standard deviation of the map sizes. World War II definitely has the least diverse map sizes, so that means that the largest and the smallest maps basically are closer together in size than in any other game. So I hope seeing all this data about the Call of Duty maps helps you better understand your feelings about the World War II maps, and that it might not be just because they're small that they're bad. There's probably something else going on here. Oh, and I kind of had this fun little tidbit about how big Battlefield maps were. If you walk along the inner coast of Wake Island in Battlefield 3, it takes 7 minutes and 47 seconds. That's without sprinting. And if you do it in a buggy, it takes 1 minute and 32 seconds. So going across part of a Battlefield 3 map in a buggy is like walking completely around a Call of Duty map. So thanks for watching. Consider subscribing or liking this video, watching another video. You know, have a nice life.